Anyway, with Phil Brooks,
His name is not Phil Brooks, it's CM Punk. How many times do I have to repeat this to you? I'm sick and tired. What the hell's that?
I don't know.
I think somebody's at the door.
Hey. You can't even film stuff without people knocking.
Well, that's the way of the world. Who is it?
But don't start personally insulting me.
Huh?
But don't start personally insulting me.
Hannibal! Oh, no! Not that way! There!
Welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monte the Pharaoh, filmed out of here in the Music TV, straight out of Ronkonkoma, Long Island. At the board, Matty Ice. Matty, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. It's a pretty good day.
So people should know, and next week will be a somber show. Matt is leaving Indie Music TV, going on to bigger and better things. A well-deserved great producer who's been producing us for almost 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, we'll give you all your flowers next week, brother,
Flowers?
but you will be missed.
Flowers.
That's for sure.
Thank you.
What if he likes lilacs?
Great show.
What?
Oh, by the way,
What kind of flowers are you
everybody
gonna
out there,
give
just
Matt?
so you know,
No.
our special guest, Jim Brunzell,
Yeah, what about him?
great
He enjoyed
wrestler,
the
human
conversation
being.
we just had, me and
We
him.
were talking for like a half an hour, and I'm talking about Pamela
You
Lee
weren't talking. You
and
left the room. I was
Tommy
talking.
Lee, and then Pharaoh goes in full Pharaoh mode and starts talking about everything but
Tommy Lee and Pamela?
like fun
Which is
stuff.
the first thing I think of when I think of Jim Brunzell.
Talking
Tommy
about
Lee and Pamela.
Bill Watts.
Yeah, that's right. Bill Watts.
Anyway,
I've seen someone that reminds me of Bill Watts.
Pharaoh.
What? Yeah.
Idaho governor
Yeah.
signs a bill banning abortion after 6 weeks, modeled after Texas law. Idaho became the first U.S. state to enact a law modeled after a recent legislation passed at Texas that bans abortions after 6 weeks before many women even know they're pregnant. What do you think of that?
Really? Really? Oh boy. Wow, that's a tough one, man, because my anatomy does not include female parts, so I'm not so sure I'm qualified to say too much about this, other than abortions are very, very, very unfortunate, and I'm not a fan of them. Can I say that?
You have a right to say what you want.
That's just my opinion, but I'm not so sure you should just order someone what to do with their body. So I guess I'm.
It's a very.
I guess I'm kind of ripped up about this one.
It's a
You
very
got me
tricky,
on this one.
It's a very tricky thing, right?
Yeah, it is.
You can believe things religiously,
Right.
but then you live in a country where you have a right to.
A lot of bad
do a lot of
things
things,
happen.
right?
Not. It's not all the time that women ask to be pregnant either. There's cases of rape, obviously, and things like that. So, man, oh man, you really got me on that one. I'm not a fan of abortions, but at the same time, I'm not so sure I'm qualified to tell a woman what to do with her body. I guess that's how I feel about that.
So you could personally, in my opinion, you could
Yeah.
personally not believe in something. That's great. But I'm going to reiterate
Not a
that this
fan of it.
country is built on a lot of things, and as far as I understood, and again, I'll probably get corrected. Right, Roe versus Wade, was that it? Right?
Yeah, I believe so.
There was a judgment made, and
Right.
Women were allowed to have an abortion
Right.
for whatever reason they'd like to, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the law stood.
Right.
I'm not so sure that I agree with states being able to break away from these laws and be independently
Right,
on
but we're
themselves,
seeing more
right?
of that in other areas of laws and contentious subjects. So it's happening.
Very tricky stuff.
It is.
And if you didn't know, that is the star of the show, Mr. Jimmy Pharaoh.
Hello.
Great show last week.
Yeah. John Cena Sr.
Very good.
I
He was
said it.
excellent.
He was excellent. I love great guy. Oh,
So,
my
by the way,
Lord.
before we get to
What
our
a class
guest, I
act.
just wanted to cover something with you. We took some heat last week.
We did?
With our comments on the both the AEW champion
Who's
Britt
miffed?
Baker and her friend there, Thunder Rosa.
They're mad at us.
Took
That's right.
offense
That's
to
right.
our Twitter comments
Yes.
about them using fake blood and gimmicked thumbnails that they felt
Thumbnails?
thumbnails,
Thumbtacks.
whatever you want to
thumb
call
notes.
them, whatever. It's the same.
Wait. Can I? Fraud. Okay.
Please, I knew that was coming.
Yeah. But they didn't.
But they took offense.
Yeah.
And they felt they had to go to Twitter and respond back to what was
Yeah,
said.
well,
Thoughts on that whole situation?
You ruffled their pro wrestling chicken feathers.
Do you
They
feel
were
that?
mad.
Do you feel I was out of line saying that it was fake? Do you still think it was fake?
Yeah.
They were showing.
I thought it was fake the
They
other
went
time
out of
that
their
they
way,
bled.
but they went out of their way to show
but it's
all the
wrestling.
thumbtack
What's
holes.
the big deal if
But
I
they
think
went to
it's
show the
not
thumbtack
real?
holes, and so did Audrey
the thumbtack
Edwards.
holes.
Put the show the holes where she had from the thumbtacks.
Okay.
So maybe we're wrong. Maybe it was real.
What, the way they all fell off after she stood up? They all fell off like they weren't really sticking. Most of them, like 98% of them, fell off.
It was fake.
We showed it.
Fake blood.
Hey, yeah, fake.
We're going to talk to our guest about that later on.
Yeah.
Even though I get the feeling he doesn't really watch AEW, which I don't blame him, by the way.
Yeah, well, maybe he's just like not thrilled with today's product, but I guess we'll find out.
I would like to thank the band that sings the theme song for Monte and the Pharaoh, our own Jimmy Pharaoh, along with Park Griggs, a part of the band Wisteria Hall. Wisteria Hall sings such great songs as In My Dreams This Life, Not Far Behind, Here Comes the Rain. You can find their music on the Wisteria Hall YouTube page. Please give them a like and subscribe. Catch us on Spotify, Apple Music, and Reverb Nation. If you didn't know it, you are watching Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monte and the Pharaoh. Catch Monte and the Pharaoh on the Monte and the Pharaoh YouTube page, the Monte and the Pharaoh Facebook Live page. Here's on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Anchor. Catch us on the Monte and the Pharaoh Twitch TV page, channel 115 every Tuesday at 9:30 p.m. if you're lucky enough to live in New York and catch cable, and Saturday Night Live at 11:30 p.m. and channel
100,000
20
yet?
Tuesday at 1 a.m.
We cracked
We have
100,000?
cracked 100,000
We did it.
viewers
we were,
weekly.
We were close last week. Over the top.
Pretty good.
Nice.
We also want to thank Amazon Music for putting the Monte and the Pharaoh show on their network.
Nice.
And we're going to be right back. Before I announce that special guest, I want to give a couple of shout-outs. Maria Davis, 802
Maria.
Blues. Jacob,
802.
welcome.
What
Rick
is up?
Howard, how are you? AAA. Phil, I hope all is well.
Mr. Phil.
ESO, one of our sponsors in the house, who is now working on a very special project for Monte and the
That
Pharaoh.
was a awesome little.
Don't reveal it.
Yeah,
Davio,
it
what
was
up,
awesome.
buddy?
up,
Dan
Dav?
Crusader in the house.
Dan
Don the
Crusader.
Barber, and so
Barber.
many more.
Love that
Jacob,
name.
how are you? We'll be right back after this commercial break with Icon, superstar, and just a hell of a guy, Mr. Jim Brunzell.
See you in a sec.
Jeff Quest, graphics design, custom vinyl lettering, and all your art and video needs. 516-317-8204. That's for Jeff Quest, graphic design. The Monte and the Pharaoh Show is brought to you by...
Because wine is your second favorite four-letter word. California wine, New York attitude. Good fucking wine.
Yeah.
Jimmy, I gotta take a dump.
What?
No, I mean I need a dumpster.
Well, for all those needs, you need to call Big V Dumpster Rental, Long Island, New York, 631-900-DUMP.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monte the Pharaoh, seen here only out of Indie Music TV, out of Ronkonkoma, Long Island. We want to say welcome, Mr. Jim Brunzell. Thank you, sir, for taking the time out on our lovely little show.
Well, thanks for having me. I think it was about a year ago, wasn't it? I was on with you guys.
A little over a year ago, and I really do have a question for you. We met
Okay.
you at the start of COVID.
Right.
You were in there with Brian Blair.
Right.
And I really was thinking about you for a long time. I really got to reach out to him. Are you now a millionaire because you were selling all the hand sanitizer and all that good stuff? Right? You were working as a rep, right?
I was working as a rep, but I got to tell you, most of those products, disinfectants on a huge scale, were back ordered to the point where my company it had sales of $7 million that they couldn't reach because we couldn't get the product.
Wow.
Oy.
So what ended up happening? Did everybody just cancel those back orders, or what happened?
No, they couldn't cancel the back orders. They just, we'd get a little bit, somebody had ordered 10 cases. Well, they get one case. Then when the rest of them came in, it might be spread over. But that was a problem in the industry too, because, it was that way with, masks and everything else, gloves and, hand sanitizer. It was unbelievable.
Did you think?
Thank God we've turned the corner.
Oh, you ain't
yeah.
kidding. I was going to ask you, did you think that day it was just basically starting, and we were kind of all joking about it in a way, and did you ever think it was going to turn out the way it turned out?
No, and it's funny because I was coming back from New Jersey. I did a show, and this guy in back of me was coughing in the plane. Horrible, bad cough. And I turned around and I said, please cover your mouth. And this guy was on the point of being delirious. And of course, 4 days later, I get sick. I have a fever. I got a cough. I can't go out of bed, get out of bed for about 4 or 5 days. And I wound up getting COVID, and I lost my sense of smell, and I still haven't got it back.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that, but otherwise you're healthy though, thank God, right?
Well, I think I mentioned earlier I had my 10th surgery related to my pro wrestling career. 4 weeks ago, I had what they call a reverse right shoulder arthroplasty, which they cut the ball out of your shoulder and they put a new joint, and then they put a new ball in there, and then they secure it to a part of the scapula. So I was told by my doctor that I'll be restricted to lifting anything over 20 pounds in my right arm. So my weightlifting days are probably gone, but it could be worse,
Absolutely.
Jim, recently, and I'm not sure if you knew this fellow, but we lost our friend from the show, J.J. Maguire. He was the co-writer of a lot of the themes for WWE, along with Jimmy Hart back in the early 90s. Did you have any memories? Did you ever come across J.J. Maguire? And if not, what is your opinion on the importance of having a really good intro song for a wrestler?
Oh, geez. Well, I know your first question, Jimmy. I didn't meet J.J. Maguire, but I'm very familiar with Jimmy Hart, and knew his background and music, and sure, there was, you have a catchy tune going to the ring, people boom automatically, as soon as they hear those opening notes, they know the Killer Bees are coming, or the Hearts are coming, and then with Hulk with his theme song, they, as soon as boom, they heard that he was coming, and it was great to do. We tried 2 or 3 different songs, and the problem was that if they were famous artists that had that song, you couldn't use it because then you would have to pay him. And Vince didn't want to do that, so Vince sort of wound up making up his own music for a lot of, or maybe he had Jimmy Hart do it. He probably did, for a lot of his talent. But I know Brian and I came out to a couple different things. So, but you're right. It sure adds to your, the selling of your presence.
Were you ever happy with your music, or what was your take on the songs you went out to over the years? Any particular one?
Well, see, I wanted Springsteen music, and right away I couldn't do it. And then Brian wasn't too hip on it, and McMahon wasn't either. So it didn't either way. I thought, well, if we come out to something, we come out to something. So,
Right, right. Unfortunately, over the last few days, we've lost one of the all-time greats, Razor Ramon, also, of course, known as Scott Hall. Can you give us or share with us any personal memories of Scott Hall and his impact on this business?
well, he was very unique because he came and as Razor Ramon and got over extremely well. Good-looking guy, very athletic, had good presence in the ring, could talk, and boom, he took off. And I know he had, throughout his career, he had a horrible battle with substance abuse, and it took its toll on him. And you just add these number of people that succumb to substance abuse, whether it be alcohol or drugs, and it's amazing because there was, there's probably 2 to 3 dozen wrestlers in the last 20 years that have passed because of substance abuse. And I know that he didn't die of substance abuse, but I'm sure it had a critical play on his life. And also, I know, the bumps and bruises, and, he had a hip transplant, or hip replacement, and then, got blood clots and had a couple of heart attacks and wound up on a ventilator, and then they took him off. So, I mean, you just never know, and all of us who spent so much time in the ring, and, I have figured that I've had close to 5,000 matches in 27 years.
Wow.
And all those matches I did a lot of drop kicking and stuff like that. So I ruined my knees and I ruined my shoulders. And consequently, I'm paying for that price now. Could be a lot worse, but, I'll be 73 in August. And I thank the Lord for a very blessed life that I've had with a great family relationship with my wife and my kids. And also I still stay close with a number of, some of the wrestlers that I was real close with. And, I'm very active in my kids' life and my 2 grandsons. So, I'm pretty happy being retired now.
So it's fair to say, though, that if you could start over, Jim Brunzell would have still been Jim Brunzell, the wrestler. You would not have chosen a different life.
Well, I wanted to play pro football, but I wasn't good enough. So
Okay,
I had
okay.
to, and it's funny because I remember when that 30-30 movie came out, a documentary on Ric Flair, and we went to the opening of it in Minneapolis. And after we saw it, I just, I looked at it and I thought, geez, I shook my head. And then I said to Greg, I said, if Rick had it to do all over again, he'd do it the same way. And Greg said, yeah, he would. So, I mean, I know, Rick I think Rick is 73 now. He might be closing in on 74, but he's still got his mug out there and he's still hooing with everybody, and, more power to him.
So, last time you were in studio, you were with your partner, Brian Blair. Could you fill the fans in? How's Brian doing? I know he's gone through some really tough times, the passing of his son, and he's had some health issues. Could you share with the fan how Brian's doing?
Well, I talked to him a couple times, maybe once every 7 to 10 days. And if we're not talking, we're emailing or texting. And he's had 4 or 5 back and neck surgeries. And then the last time he had a surgery, he wound up getting an infection called osteomyelitis in his backbone. He damn near died. He was in the hospital for 4 or 5 weeks. And so he lost a lot of weight. And, the fact that, having to deal with the loss of his son this past summer is just horrifying for anybody, any parent to think that could happen. And then, somebody that it did, and it was horrible. So right now he's in a good space. We're going to go to next week. We're going to go to Dallas for the WrestleMania WrestleCon down there a couple days, and it's always interesting to go to those because actually the only reason why I go is because I want to see the guys that we worked with so many years ago, and you wind up seeing a lot of those guys. And I know that we're not going to be going to the WrestleMania matches, that's for sure. But Vincent probably charges $2,000 for the nosebleed,
For parking.
nosebleed seats.
No, that's
Yes.
for parking. What are you talking
No,
about?
he'd want us to park the cars.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
man.
That's the thing with
Poor
Vince.
Vince.
Poor Vince? Forget that. Oh, my Lord. Jim, I'm not sure if you're watching the current product, but me and Mike are on a tangent lately with AEW. Would you like to weigh in on the use of fake blood and fake thumbtacks? Any thoughts? Fake blood.
Oh God! Well,
Fake
I haven't watched. I see the picture out there, and I remember a time, and I'm trying to think of his name now, and he lives up in Connecticut. Jesus, gosh, he's a Hall of Famer, and he wrestled in a couple of names, and he had the puppets with his hand.
Foley? Mick Foley?
Yeah.
Mick Foley, yeah.
Yes,
Foley's
Mick Foley.
Foley's from Long Island. Not that we're proud of that, but
Is he? Oh, I thought he
But
lived in Connecticut.
Whatever, semantics.
Yeah,
Who really cares? But go
Yeah.
ahead, Jim.
But I remember him doing all that crazy stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
on the glass and and the tacks. And I thought, that guy isn't going to be able to walk when he's 65 years old, And so far, I haven't heard he's had any surgery. So maybe, maybe he's bouncing the right way.
Yeah.
But
maybe he was just born to bounce.
Yeah, he was born to bounce. There'll be a song. G-Man will come out with a rap on that.
G-Man's going to come out with a rap. Born to bounce. That's great.
Yes. Born to bounce, baby. So,
Unbelievable.
I don't know. I did a documentary last week with A&E on Khosrow Vaziri, the Iron Sheik.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they said, "Do you have any stories about the Iron Sheik?" And I said, "Yes, I do." Yeah. So I said, "You want the good ones or the bad ones?"
All of them.
He said, "Well, sort of mix them in." And I told him, I said, I had my worst match with Khosrow, and I said, I had a match where he choked me out in the ring with a tag team rope, and then as I was just barely conscious, he threw me through the second and third rope, and I landed, and my head bounced, and I had 29 stitches in this eyebrow here. And I got up, and I thought, what in the heck happened, and Khosrow, he was trying to figure out how I did it, how it was my fault, but he couldn't. So, It was an interesting interview, and we talked for about an hour and 5 minutes. But there's another guy who's, put up with a lot of stuff, and his daughter was taken, and drugs were involved, and he had a horrible ankle, and he never fixed, and he's almost crippled now. But I heard from these people that he's got over 600,000 followers on Instagram.
Right.
So he's doing pretty good, I guess.
Yeah.
That's not too bad. So we were talking earlier about New York and Minnesota, right? So you were in the AWA, where I think you guys wrestled most of the time in the winter, and you had your summers off. Is that accurate?
No, we wrestled quite a bit in the winter because people are captivated to being inside because of the cold weather.
No, that's what I said.
But
I said that
once-
reversed. You had your summers off, but you wrestled in the winters, correct?
Yes, well, that's right. But we didn't have the summers off. We wrestled maybe 2 to 3 times a week during the summer, which was great. Usually it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we had Monday, through Thursday off, which was great.
But summer in Minnesota is only like 2 weeks, isn't it? I mean, how long is this summer in Minnesota?
Well, it could be 4 weeks, but
I knew I was
actually,
warm. I mean, actually, you're not warm.
But so when
That's
you
the
when you
problem.
came up here to the WWE or WWF, what kind of was that a
Yes.
culture shock to you? Because now you're working
God.
what 340 days a year.
this is the honest to gospel truth, and I don't know if I showed you this the last time, but I wrote this book a couple years ago, and it's called Matlands.
Yes.
And I published it myself from Blurb, and in here is 46 stories, and I document just about everything, all the interesting stories, and they're true. But Brian and I wrestled for 3.5 years. We averaged 27 days a month.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I have that on my books. 27 days a month. I remember we went 52 days straight, and then Greg Valentine broke my hand in Rockford, Illinois, so I had 2 days off, and then I came back with a cast on, and the Bees won more matches with using my cast to clothesline than we did with any drop kicks.
So did you?
That's
so
the-
did
that's the
Brian?
heel of Vince.
Did Brian wear the cast too? So when you guys swapped those masks around, you really had that kayfabe thing going on. Or what?
He had one, but it was a little more flesh colored than mine.
I got a fan out there who wants to ask you a question. We're going to go back to
Sure.
Scott Hall a little bit. He wants to know, how was Razor like when you came back to the WWF in 1992? How did he treat you?
Razor Ramon.
Who?
Razor,
Ramon.
Scott Hall. Scott Hall.
Oh, well,
You can say it. It's okay.
here's the whole problem. When I came back, I had my own business in White Bear. It was called Jumping Jim Brunzell's Gym, and I had a good nut per month that I had to make, and so it was advantageous for me to wrestle part-time with the WWE. So whenever any babyface got hurt, or somebody got suspended or whatever, they'd call me in for a couple, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time, and I'd make good money. So although one of the things that Vince did to me, and it bothered me, was he put me in with these guys, and some of them were on TV, and he wanted me to put them over 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring. And first I thought, well, if a heel beats a babyface in the middle of the ring, 1, 2, 3, first of all, that doesn't say much about the babyface. And a heel should do something, to violate in some way or other that his opponent, in order to beat him, to maintain the heat on him. So that was one thing that I had to deal with. And I remember, you can look this match up. It was let's see, what's his name? Doggone it. Randy Savage and I had a match on TV. It was on one of the first Monday Night Raws, and I knew and he had what's her name? Not his wife, but the I can't
Sherry?
remember what's her name? Sherry.
Sherry Martel.
Yes. Yes. So she was in his corner, and we had a hell of a match. And I remember we did a little series, and he jumped over me, and I came back and I hit him right in the mouth with the drop kick. And he got up and he was spitting blood, and I thought, oh Jesus, here we go. But
Oh boy.
we had a hell of a match, and I'll never forget. After the match, we went through the curtain, and Vince McMahon was right there, and he said, "Gentlemen," he said, "that's the best TV match I've ever seen." So I don't know if he was just blowing smoke, but it was a good match. So you can watch it. It's probably 12, 13 minutes long on YouTube, but it was an excellent match, and Randy gave me a lot at the match, and he was a true professional. And there was another guy who died way too soon. But Razor Ramon, when he came back, when you get over in New York and you get a little cocky, and he was a little, well, he wanted to be real dominant in the match, and again, I don't appreciate that, and it does nothing for the heel to try to out wrestle a babyface. All it does is demean the babyface, and it actually confuses the wrestling fan. So
The bookings today must drive you crazy if you are familiar with today's wrestling, and even over the last 10 plus years, there's this 50-50 booking. What's your take on that? The neutrality of characters. You can't grasp onto the character, the wrestler, with a 50-50.
everybody's the same, Jimmy.
Right.
If you watch somebody, and I'm talking about AEW and WWE, if you watch these guys come out and all their interviews are choreographed to the comma, they all are brave and strong, and there's no weakness there. There's no humility, and that's what Vince has been successful in creating. He's created these superstars that he calls them, and they're all the same. I mean, you look at them, all of them, and the format is about the same. And I don't watch it that much, but you'll see somebody, and all of a sudden the car will drive up backstage, and somebody will jump out and do this or do that, and the person in the ring will come back and take a count of 100 while he's out chasing the guy in the car and stuff like that. So I don't watch it anymore. I don't find any redeeming qualities in it. I'm very happy, and I think it's fortunate that the boys are making such a good payday, and they deserve it. And that's the best that I think I can say about both promotions. These guys are making great money now, and they deserve it.
You've wrestled on super cards, obviously super shows in the AWA. You've wrestled at WrestleMania, but the big question is what was the difference between the two? Like working on a super show in the AWA compared to the vibe and feel of a WrestleMania. I understand that to me, I agree it should be more about wrestling, but the entertainment aspect and the over-the-top bigness. Could you tell the difference, like, clear cut as day? Okay.
Oh yeah, because Jimmy, when we went to WrestleManias, there was 20 different countries there with their news force.
Right.
All of a sudden you
Right.
see, you see people from Japan and London and Australia, and they were interested in, I'll never forget that when we were at the Superdome in Pontiac, Michigan, and it was WrestleMania 3. And it was Brian and I against the Sheik and Volkov. And during that match, Jim Duggan came in and more or less caused us to get disqualified. And we were supposed to be happy with that. We were supposed to, pat him on the shoulder and thank him for coming in and getting us disqualified. So that was Vince's way of introducing Jim Duggan at our expense to get him over. But the feel was incredible. I mean, and one thing I'll say is that we were supposed to originally go on second or third, and it wound up that they put us on in a final match, and Hulk and Andre were the last ones. And everybody was waiting to see Hulk and Andre. They didn't care about the Bees and Nikolai and Khosrow. So, it was great in the fact that those WrestleManias were so accepted and publicized, and that's due to Vince's connections and the promotions that he had, with Dick Ebersol and the production of the TV, and it was great to be on those. And I'll tell you, I had a hour match in Winnipeg, Canada. I think it was 1982, Yeah, and it was Nick Bockwinkel, and we went an hour draw, and that one too is also on YouTube, and that was a hell of a match, honest to God. And we had that crowd, which was a sellout crowd, into every move, every false finish, everything, right up until the end. And to me, I had two or three hour draws with Nick Bockwinkel, who I thought was incredible in the ring. He was one of the greatest. I had three draws with Harley Race, who in his time as NWA champion was, he'd do an hour draw every night. I had three draws with Ric Flair in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had one with Jimmy Snuka, and I had a couple, believe it or not, with Iron Sheik, Khosrow Vaziri.
Wow.
And those were a battle of, it was like getting a full set of implants with only a half a shot of Novocaine.
I got to ask, WrestleMania 3, Hogan and Andre, it happens to be our favorite match, my partner and myself, basically, because it was just, we were huge Hogan fans. The timing was right. We grew up with him in basically high school and stuff. So we get Hogan Andre, the body slam, the 93,000. I'm really curious. Were the wrestlers looking at the match from the back? Because nowadays you see all this behind-the-scenes stuff. You see wrestlers watching important matches from the back and stuff. Were you guys like peeking out? Was anybody like peeking out watching Hogan Andre do something absolutely legendary? Okay, not a clinic, but my God, what a story that was. Were you guys watching?
Yeah, it was. And I think some were, looking, but they had some monitors back there that you could watch it.
Cool.
Without, sticking your head through the curtains. And,
cool.
It was hard seeing it that way because there were so damn many people, and you were at least 100 yards away from the ring at that where they had our locker rooms. But yeah, it was a great match, and Andre. He was such an athletic, big man, and he knew his position there. And Hulk was a golden goose, and he did him right, and it was a great match. And let's face it, the WWE today is what it is today because of Hulk Hogan. Really,
thank you.
He was a golden goose.
Thank you.
He was.
Truth.
He was, and not to say he was the greatest wrestler in the world.
Of course not.
But for what he had, the package he had, his look, his rap, his entrance, his athleticism in the ring. I mean, if you can go back and you can see him on YouTube wrestling Antonio Inoki in Japan, 2 or 3 years before he came to New York. And here's a guy 6'8", 300 pounds that could actually get down on the mat and wrestle. I mean, he was good. He impressed the heck out of me.
How much pressure do you think Hulk Hogan, the person, was carrying with him during those days to perform on the level that he was to break the barriers he was being asked to break? How much pressure do you think this man had to deal with?
Well, he was under pressure like all of us were because we all had to perform, and he was in a different level. But at the same time, he was over. I mean, all he had to do was come to the ring and put his hand up like that, and the people would go crazy. I mean, he didn't have to do anything. Right. He didn't have to, leapfrog or drop down or hip toss and head scissor a guy and arm drag him, and he was Hulk.
Right.
And it was a great era, and it was funny because I mentioned this last week. I remember I have a Sports Illustrated, I think it was from 1980 or 81. Might have even been later. And it's got Hulk Hogan on it, and he's like this, and it says the top banana in athletics, highest paid performer, 10 million he made. Wow. He was the highest paid athlete, and I still have that Sports Illustrated someplace. And, he was, making 50,000 a week, plus he was getting 12 to 15% of the net or the gate of championship matches when they draw the $150,000, he was making like 25 grand a night.
Wow.
Right. Wow.
So it's fair
And,
to say
and this,
it's
yeah.
fair to say that you wanted to be on that A card with him, right? Because the paydays must have been
oh
much
God,
better.
yes, yes,
There you go.
it sure was.
There you go.
It sure was.
Yeah.
Hey Jim, so when we were into wrestling, right? We were just speaking before the show. You guys didn't watch. You couldn't watch Up East, and we couldn't watch you guys. But we always looked at the magazines,
back in the
right?
cable days,
Back in the
right.
days, right?
Yeah.
So I was, when I think of Jim Brunzell, I always think about the High Flyers with
Right.
Greg Gagne,
Yep.
and I think about reading all those great stories against you and you two against Adonis and Ventura, who I became big fans of, and when they came up here, it was huge. But I didn't realize how much time you had spent in the WWE, and if you remember, Kurt Hennig started up here. And he was like
Yep.
enhancement talent for a while. Mm-hmm. He goes to the AWA and he starts building a name, and then he comes here, and then of course Terry Taylor's here. And I guess my question to you: you were around during that time too. There's a story out there that they discussed that the two gimmicks of Mr. Perfect and the Red Rooster were up for grabs, and they flipped the coin to see who was going to be who. Is that true?
I never heard that.
Never heard that. Okay.
It might have been, Kurt was a hell of a worker, and so was Terry. Terry was a better babyface than a heel, I think. Mm-hmm. But they wanted to make him this heel, and Kurt was a natural heel, and Kurt was a wrestling heel. And at one time, Kurt probably was one of the best in the top 3 best overall workers in the WWE, and he might have been in the top 3 in the whole world of wrestling.
Right.
You had, to me, I look at these guys that I was fortunate enough to see and work with, and I see some guys, like Jake the Snake Roberts was incredible. His timing in the ring, everything he did looked good. Same with Bob Orton Jr., one of the best. I had plenty of time working with him. His timing and everything he did in the ring was incredible, And then and you have Ricky Steamboat, who was a great babyface. Oh God, incredible! And there was so many guys, and and then you have the character wrestlers, like Ric Flair, 1 in a million, and there's a lot of them that I probably didn't mention, and Bret Hart was excellent. But I mean, when you think of what made New York, and the WWE, it was Hulk Hogan all the way.
Sure. So back to Taylor, though. Do you think that that gimmick was just so bad it just didn't get over, or do you think that he just couldn't get into it?
That gimmick.
Because I got to be personal. I really
was-
did like the Red
That
Rooster.
gimmick
I
was
really
awful.
enjoyed the
Would
Red
you
Rooster.
please tell him that gimmick was terrible, and if Mr. Perfect had been the Rooster, I would have squawked. Help me out, Jim,
Well,
please.
let me tell you something.
Brother.
This
Brother.
brother.
Oh.
Vince McMahon had a way of giving guys a gimmick that he was making fun of other people in the wrestling business.
Okay.
And a great deal of this was when, I want to see, it was Harley Race, they called the King, and then David.
You had Virgil.
Oh, shoot.
You had Virgil.
Yeah,
for
Virgil.
Dusty,
Yeah,
right?
Virgil
Yeah.
got named for Dusty.
Yeah,
Aye.
Yeah.
So who was
and
the
then-
Red Rooster?
And that was it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Aye.
So, he had his own way of just sort of, and then he made Harley Race wear this crown, King,
Yeah.
And then he brought, the Funks in and didn't know what to do with them. And Dory Funk and Terry Funk were great. Honest to God, they were good.
Yeah.
And then, they didn't know what to do with them, and they just sat and bounced around, and,
Where do you put Bob Backlund? I gotta ask, because in the magazine days, this was always pissing us off. They would rank Pro Wrestling Illustrated or The Wrestler or Inside Wrestling, the mags. They would rank the champions, and it always seems like Bob Backlund, we felt, was like, what the F? They would give it to Bockwinkel, they'd give it to Race. They always seemed to put Bob after them. What's your memories of Bob Backlund? And you know, he belongs with these guys. I'm sorry, but, you know, what's your take?
Well, here's the deal. Bobby was a great babyface wrestler. He was a great collegiate wrestler. He was more or less what you'd say is a real humble interview. And I think Vince Jr. didn't like that. He didn't get along with Bobby. And his dad wanted to have a wrestling champion. That's why they gave Bob Backlund the championship belt, because they thought, hey, you know, we're going to be just like the AWA, and we're going to give somebody the world champion that can really wrestle, which Bob could do. And I'll just say what happened to me, and then it sort of reflects Vince's attitude about Bob Backlund. So the very first day I came to WWE, I flew into LaGuardia, and then we went into Poughkeepsie in a small plane. Mm-hmm. And I remember doing the TV, and I think it was June 26th, and it was 1985. So Gene Okerlund's doing the interviews, and they had a ton of interviews that day, and then you had 2 or 3 hours of TV, and then the next day we'd fly to Canada and do the same thing over. So Gene Okerlund is interviewing me, and it's a typical, you know, humble babyface interview, you know, and Gene knew my background after being in the AWA with the High Flyers and blah, blah, blah. So I did just a normal all-American babyface interview. And as I walked away from the interview, I heard Vince McMahon say, "Oh, another Backlund."
Oh, my God, really?
Man.
Oh, boy.
That's what he said. And I thought, oh, boy. Yeah, so that was my first day in New York.
Well,
He fired me 3 times.
Yeah, I was on that. I'm just getting to this. You worked for Vince. You worked for Vern Gagne. You worked for Crockett. Tell us the difference between the three of them.
Wait a minute, can I just get this in, though?
Yeah,
real
sure.
quick?
Go ahead.
You're fired. You're fired. You're fired.
Yeah, he did it 3 times, Jim.
3 times.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
That's horrible, by the way.
Well,
Okay, tell us the difference between them. Oy.
Well, I'll tell you what, all of them had pretty good egos. Jim Crockett was not athletic, so he really didn't know what he was doing. He was just lucky that he was in a territory that he had such great talent, and at that time, George Scott was a good booker. And that's what flew that thing off the coop. I mean, they had Roddy Piper in there, they had Ric Flair, they had Wahoo McDaniel, and they had and it was hopping every night.
So Crockett was a master. Crockett was a master delegator. Then it sounds like he knew how to delegate.
Without a doubt.
Well, the other guys, I would assume, are more hands-on.
Oh, Vern was hands-on left and right. I mean, he knew exactly what he wanted. He knew what he wanted in the matches. He knew how the guys were going to behave outside, and everybody realized their position in the AWA, and everybody got along. Everybody had great matches, and everybody made good money. Period. And there was only 14 guys. So you look at the WWE, and all of a sudden you got 60 to 75 guys because there's no other territory to work in. And all these guys, a lot of them were top workers in the various territories. So they're fighting and clawing and grabbing for, you know, any advantage they could get. So when you on a nightly basis were going out there with these guys, and all of a sudden, you know, they're trying to get over at the expense of you when you're trying to get the match over, that is not going to end up in a good wrestling situation, you know, for the guys and also for the territory. And Vince didn't care, you know. They had problems, you know. I mean, I remember Cosroe. I think it was over 80 days in a row. That's That's ridiculous. And we were flying every single day in an airplane. So, and then, renting a car and then going, I remember making a trip with Jake Roberts, and we started in Vancouver, and we went all the way down, and we wound up in Phoenix, Arizona 10 days later. And we drove down all the way through, and we stopped here and stopped there in Washington, and then wrestled in San Francisco and wrestled in LA and wrestled it was outrageous.
Jim, you were around during the Ring Boy scandals, I believe. Lee Cole, brother of the Ring Boy scandals. Lee Cole, brother of Tom Cole, he's been on the show. Tom Cole committed suicide. He accused Mel Phillips and Terry Garvin of sexually harassing him or taking advantage of him. I know you were around during that time, but I don't know if you know anything about it. And if you do, what are your thoughts on it? And do you think that Vince is culpable for something like that going on in his organization?
I wasn't around for that, so I can't, say one way or another. But I remember when Vince was going through some rather questionable behavior, and he was being investigated. And I remember I asked Hulk Hogan. I said, Terry, I says, what do you think? What's this with Vince? And Terry told me, he says, Vince McMahon is capable of anything and everything. And then he walked away.
Wow.
Whoa. Jim, in your mind, if Vern had kept Hogan around, what do you think would have happened with the future of the wrestling business if somehow he had stayed in the AWA?
Well, it would have been great for the AWA, and it would have been good for Terry for a period of time. But here's the main drawback, and I've said this before, and Vern Gagne was a very, very egotistical guy. And, his whole life, he was an amateur wrestler, champion, high school wrestler, college wrestler, alternated in the Olympics. He played football. He was a great athlete all the way around. And he had an enormous ego. I mean, just enormous. And I think that probably if Terry, here's the deal. Terry was completely the opposite of what Vince was, or what Vern was, in that Terry was a muscle-bound, guitar playing, rock and roll player.
Right.
That was a bodybuilder, had a good rap, but I think Terry said that he played softball or something like that, fast pitch softball. But so I think the ego would have gotten involved somewhere in the. And I to be honest with you, everything happened for the best. I know it wasn't the best for the AWA because they folded, but so did the rest of the territories. And WWE was king. So I think it would have been good for Hogan. There's so much innuendo and rumors saying, well, yeah, they were going to give the belt to Terry in Chicago, and CBS wanted to be there, and this and that, and that's all speculation because it never happened. So I just think that the way things happened, it was great in one respect that it enabled Terry Bollea to be the golden goose of pro wrestling, and it enabled a lot of other guys who wrestled and still could have an opportunity to wrestle in New York to make a pretty good living, even though we had no representation, we had no retirement, we had no hospitalization, no nothing. That was one of the reasons why I got fired. I thought, geez, I called Gene Upshaw from the NFL Players Association, and he says, oh boy, he said, you're going to have trouble. And he says, because he said, in order for you to succeed with the union in wrestling, he said, you're going to have Hulk Hogan, go along with it. And in reality, if Hulk Hogan would have gone along with us, he would have been the one hurt the most.
Right. Right.
Because, so of course it didn't happen, but, I still have no idea if there's any profit sharing or if there's any, hospitalization, because I know there wasn't when I was there.
Jim, back to that
certainly not.
union thing though.
Right.
Was it you and Ventura together, trying to get the boys together, or how did that start?
Well, Jesse, was talking it up, and I was talking. We were on sort of different levels, and it just wasn't going to happen. And I think that Vince got word of it, and I was easily dismissed, and I don't know. Jesse, didn't. I don't know if Jesse worked that much longer, for Vince or not. But I've seen him once in a while, and he told me he was going to run for president. And I said, "Oh Jesus!" So, so he lives.
You're not
about,
voting for him? What are you talking about?
What do you mean you're not voting for him?
He works for Russian TV. They have. He works for RT. Yes, he works for Russian TV. He does a weekly program, and they built a studio in his house so he wouldn't have to travel.
Oh my God.
So I want to go back to your firing. Who was the person that fired you over this union? Did Vince personally do it, or did he send one of his henchmen after you?
I think it was Pat Patterson.
Oh, really?
Pat Patterson said, "Yeah, I think he was, and he did it on a spur of the moment deal. He just says you're no longer going to be booked." So I was done that day, and then when they called me back to work again, I told Pat, I says, "Pat, if you're gonna, if Vince is gonna, drop me," I says, "at least give me a couple weeks notice so I can." Prepare the family, and do this and do that. And he says, "Oh, don't worry." Well, they fired me again. And I think it was, I can't remember if I think it was somebody else. It wasn't Pat Patterson, but yeah. And I remember Vince, I think the third time he fired me, I had suggested something to him on the sly. I said, I said, "I got a great idea." I said, "I know you always want to be a wrestler. Why don't I say something to you? You come and question me, and then I'll beat the shit out of you, and then we can get booked around the horn, and I'll put you over." And he says, "I don't think that'll happen, Jim."
You could have been the Stone Cold Steve Austin.
You might have put the seed in his mind, though.
All right, Jim, I want to thank you. We're almost out of time. We want to hit you with something called the Pharaoh's Final Question. This is where the start of the show, Jimmy Pharaoh goes off script, and he thinks in his brain what he's going to ask you, and it could be anything. It could be, he's asked some people if they like peanut butter or jelly. Boxers or briefs. So Jimmy's going to have it with you, and let's see it's good.
Don't make it that hard.
Maybe boxers, briefs, and hard, all in the same.
There you go. Well,
would you please? Oh my Lord! Jim, you've talked about 10 surgeries over the course of your career. Now you're up to surgery number 10. You got to explain one thing to me. Is it youthful exuberance during the moments of your career that made you obviously love doing this to yourself? I mean, in some strange way. What makes a wrestler keep coming back for more pain?
Well, I think it's a feeling of satisfaction that you get, and accomplishment, and knowing in yourself, in your being, that you're good at what you're doing. And I think that enables us, like who would have known, after 20 some years, I would have, screwed up my body so bad. But, you look at the football players, and a lot of them guys are limping around too. And they didn't have a 25-year career, but they had a 15 or 12-year career. But I just, it was just what I was going to do. And I was fortunate to come come out of it, with a wonderful wife and two great kids who I've never had any problem with. And like I say, I've had a real blessed life, and thank the good Lord for that. And, I've had all these replacements, but you always look at it, it could be worse.
Well, Jim, I got to tell you that we're glad you became a professional wrestler.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You've thrilled a lot of people out there your entire life. You should be very proud of yourself. And again, we want to thank you for joining the show. We hope you come up to New York soon. We'd love to have you back in studio, our new studio, by the way. And have a great weekend. And thank you for everything, my friend.
Well, listen, I appreciate you having me on again. You guys do a great job. If you guys could text me your address, I don't know if you've read my book, but I'd gladly send you a couple books.
Please.
That would be fantastic.
Please.
I will.
Okay,
that would be fantastic. And
Okay.
I promise you that Pharaoh's cats will not get near that
Jim,
book.
You know what? You've done it now. Jim, here's the truth. When you came down last time, you brought me a book. You signed it. You wrote something really cool and stuff. I'm like, this is great. And then I was getting ready to move, and I had all my stuff in a box, and my three cats decided to tear up your autograph and ruin the book. Could you please send me another one? Please.
Will do.
Please.
No problem.
You see, you just made the Pharaoh's life, brother. There you go. He was like, oh, please, I hope
That was
Jim sends
awful.
another book.
You had to
Jim,
do
thanks again, man. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Peace.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Peace. Thanks, bro. He's a bro. That's Jim Brunzell. I'm calling him bro. This is terrible. Oy.
Great
He's
job.
awesome.
Want to thank
Yeah,
Mr.
he's
Jim
great.
Brunzell.
He's
What a
great.
guy. I could talk to that guy nonstop.
Oh,
man.
he's fantastic. And his book was great, too. I read the whole thing before the cats got to it. It was great. Oh, my God.
All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us. You've been watching Long Island's #1 pro wrestler and broadcast, Monte the Pharaoh. Cast us on the Monte the Pharaoh YouTube page, the Monte the Pharaoh Facebook Live page. Here's on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Anchor. And if you live in New York, channel 115 every Tuesday at 9:30 and Saturday at 11:30. And channel 20 Tuesday at 1 a.m. for the Night Walkers, where you will catch the Jim Brunzell episode in a consolidated, compressed version.
Compressed.
Pharaoh,
Like this?
first of all, we want to thank everybody for joining us again. Your loyalty to the show is incredible.
absolutely.
And I can't say enough what a fantastic gentleman Mr. Jim Brunzell is. And I got to tell you the truth,
Awesome, man. He's a good guy.
again, maybe it's me, but when a guy tells me he's 73 years old and
He does not
he looks like he's 40.
He's taking decades off. I'm looking at him. I'm like, there ain't no way you're 73.
I'm thinking about all the high-flying stuff that guy did.
Oh, my Lord.
You got to expect some sort of injuries, and
yeah.
I'm sure it's a little bit depressing, but I mean, he looks
I talk about
fantastic.
unsung heroes. Think about the style that he did back in the day. They're all trying to do this nowadays. So he's way ahead.
And to me, he's living a blessed life. He gets to be around his grandchildren,
Yeah.
his children.
Yep.
His wife is still with
Yeah.
him. I mean,
He's-
you know what?
He's good. You know?
Clean living, my friend.
Yeah.
The guy was a clean liver.
That's true, too.
And
That's
for anybody, there's some fans asking, you might have missed the Brian Blair thing. Brian got an infection. He was pretty ill, but he's on the road to recovery.
Another awesome guy,
so,
by the way.
Yeah, so
Another
that's
awesome
what
guy.
Jim shared with us, which is fantastic.
Yep.
Parting words.
Parting words. Well, once again, thank you for letting us come into your homes. I hope you enjoyed our time with Jumpin' Jim Brunzell. And until next time, later.